This is on the verge, Brian. This mic's on the verge of feedback. Hallelujah. Well, welcome, like Pastor Jim has already said, and Alex has said, that we're glad you're online. Please do comment. I have now tuned into Facebook, and so sometimes I get you to write something. So if you're watching online today, we're so glad you've joined with us. If you're watching in the upper room in our other location, feel free to comment. And as well, guess what? If you're in this place today, you can feel free to comment on Facebook as well. Sometimes you can get something and I interact, because in this world that we live in, digital is actually becoming a way to watch church in these restrictions. And so we want to welcome you and include you. I'm excited to get into a two-part mini-series really quick. It's always hard when you start digging into stuff to sometimes make it only two parts. You want to keep going longer. But I'm just going to jump into it right now for the sake of time here. And I'm going to talk about ginger gravel. Ginger gravel. Who's ever heard of ginger gravel? Not very many. Who's heard of gravel? All right, so a while back, I had this on a grocery list, ginger gravel. My wife writes the grocery list, and then I go get it. And a few weeks ago, it came up again. And I remember thinking, ginger gravel. I remember taking gravel when I was little in some really awkward ways when I had really bad stomach aches. But that's enough what I'll say. There's other ways to ingest gravel that work quicker, I guess, and somehow my mom convinced me that was the better way to get better. But that's a whole other topic. If you know, you know, and if you don't want to know. But ginger gravel, so I get the list, and I'm in the grocery store, and you get to the section where it has the signs above, and it says, different things, and it gets to anti-nausea medication. And I'm like, this must be the aisle. So I walk into the aisle, and there's a section full of anti-nausea stuff, Tums, Pepto-Bismol, gravel. And I get to the section where there's gravel, and then there's ginger gravel. And I'm like, okay, gravel, ginger gravel. And then I get into the section with ginger gravel, and then there's ginger gravel, and then, which is the name brand stuff, and then there's like the no-name or store name brand, which is not called gravel because I think that's trademark, but something very similar. And I'm looking at the name brand, and looking at the no-name brand, name brand, back and forth, and I'm reading ingredients because I don't want to mess it up. I don't even know what ginger gravel is. I want to make sure I get the right thing. And so I'm back and forth, and all of a sudden I'm looking at it, and I just go, what's the difference? Besides price, usually. And I'm reading ingredients, and I look at it, and then I just step back, and I'm like, it all looks the same to me. Now, I don't know about you gentlemen who are good husbands, but that moment of feeling uncomfortable, if you times that by 100, that was when you get the dreaded feminine products on a grocery list. Right? And so you see that, and you walk over and kind of sneak over to the section, and then you're greeted with this wall of options. And you look at the list, and you look at the options, and you look at the list, and you look at the options. And of course, there's a lady a couple things over, and you feel really uncomfortable, but you want to prove how much you love your wife, that you'll do anything for her. And you look at one, and there's like flaps for this and flaps for that, and wings this and things flying away. And I look, and I go, what's the difference? But from what I understand, there is. It all looks the same to me. Anyone ever felt that? And so obviously in groceries that happens. Guess what? It happens in other areas of life. We were going on a date night a few Fridays ago, and so I said to my wife, pick some place to go. And so, taking advantage of the opportunity, my wife chose a gluten-free place. And so I thought, I'm willing to try stuff. Let's go for it. I've heard, we've made a lot of advances in gluten-free stuff. I don't want any angry texts from gluten people after this. Angry emails. This is just my personal opinion. But we go in there, and I'm all excited, and we sit down, we talk. The waitress comes over, and there's a few options that look really good. And I'm like, I'm going to get the bison burger. So good. Potato fries or something like that. She got something else that was fancy, whatever, that I would have never touched. But anyways, I'm like, bison burger. And the waitress comes, and I say, I'm going to get the bison burger. And she goes, hey, do you want to add bacon to that? A lot of people add bacon. I'm like, oh, yeah, bacon. And she goes, and some people add an egg. I'm like, give me the egg. Give me the, everything on this bison burger. I'm getting super pumped. And then we talk for a bit, and then it comes, and this burger comes, and I'm just like, this thing looks amazing. And I'm thinking to all the other restaurants, I'm like, this is legitimate. There's no difference between this one and what I got a few weeks ago at another restaurant, until I took a bite. And I'm sorry, people who have to deal with this. Jared, I'm sorry. You're probably used to it. But in that moment, it looked like there was no difference. And I was saying, what's the difference? It all looks the same, until I took a bite, and then I realized there's a difference. I have a preference for gluten. It tasted different. It wasn't the same. But think about the English language. I'm sure all languages are hard to learn, but not only do we have words that sound the same when you say them. For instance, foot. Right? Foot. Last year, I grew a foot. So you have 3 feet? Right? Like things we say. Or how about this? Today I'm going to foot the bill. You're going to kick it? Right? What are you going to do to the bill? Or this, how about, hey, man, you look so cool today. You're like, I'm sweating. It's 35 degrees out. I don't know you're cool. No, I'm hot. I'm sweating. No, you look cool. Cool? Or wave. I was walking down the beach, admiring the waves, and you just picture people walking by waving at you. Right? If you don't know the difference, it can be very confusing. And so here, my wife, I'm just in my head, my wife's like, don't say this. But here's why context, or making sure you understand what's coming after, and it's setting it up, and I know it's a little bit dark, but it's the ones I could think of. But has anyone ever thought to themselves, I just want to dye my hair another color? Right? So the reason why I'm saying that is, if you stop at the wrong point, it can be something that's very emotional. But if it's a 2 different words, but it sounds the same, D-I-E versus D-Y-E, I thought that the other day, and so I got highlights for summer. But maybe you're in this place and you hate serial killers that they talk about on 60 Minutes, and they do documentaries on them, right? Like, it changes the whole thing. Some of you are like laughing, and then other people are horrified. I'm sorry. Again, don't text me. Maybe I should have left that. But the understanding that if you leave something without knowing it, you go, what's the difference? There's a big difference in those sentences. A massive difference. It's not all the same. I had this when I was going to leave it, but I'm in deep. Let's just say it. I got to read it right, so I say it right. Do you ever have a loved one? Do you have a loved one that's moved far away, and you haven't been able to see them, and you thought to yourself, I'd be so happy if I just saw them in half and kept one half for myself and could give. It's not even tense perfect, but I was trying. I was reaching. The tense doesn't even work there. Has anyone ever broken a nail and then used a hammer to take it out and hammer a new one in? Different kind of nail, right? Okay, so you get the point. So it's not just pharmacy, food, or English, I think. There are probably many times in life where we find ourselves asking, what's the difference? I found myself facing decisions in life and thinking, I can't tell the difference. You ever said 6 of one, half dozen of the other? Oh, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I can't tell the difference. It's all the same to me. And often we only get clarity when they're in the middle of it. Or what do they call hindsight? Is what? 2020. Because you look back and go, oh, there was a difference. I didn't really think between that decision or this decision, between that job or this job, between that girl that I dated or that girl I was going to date. There was a difference. It wasn't all just the same. So wouldn't it be great if we could look at situations and circumstances in our lives and see them accurately enough that we could actually see the difference between what we should do and what we shouldn't do? I think that would be great. Maybe jobs we should take and jobs we shouldn't take. Guys or girls we should date and not date, investments we should make and investments we should hold back on. Friends we should keep, friends we should let go. Thoughts we should say and thoughts we should just leave in our minds. There is a difference between what's right for your life, what's wrong for your life, or as we would say in scripture or church world, the difference between good and evil. Wouldn't it be great if we could look at things and have some help knowing the difference between good and evil, right and wrong? And so for the next 2 weeks, we're going to look at that. What's the difference? What to do when it all looks the same to you? If you've ever been there, we're going to try to help you out. I'm going to try to help you out today. Let's pray. Father God, we just thank you for what you're going to do in hearts and minds, that I say the words you want me to say, I speak what you want me to speak, that this isn't just my words, but it goes and touches hearts, that people leave different than when they came in, and most importantly, feel impacted by your love and who you are. In Jesus' name, and everyone said, Isaiah 5, verse 20. I'm going to jump into a verse that I've been actually seeing on social media of late. I picked this verse a few weeks ago, so I'm not doing this verse because of what I've been seeing on social media. But it's the prophet Isaiah talking to the children of Israel. And it starts in verse 8, this section, and the heading is Impending Judgment on Excesses, like excessive behaviors. And he says this in Isaiah 5, verse 20, Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. He says, whoa. Look at your neighbor and say, whoa. If you're watching today, I want to include you. Why don't you type in the comments if you're watching today, just type whoa, W-O-E, not like whoa, Nelly, the horse. But woe as in meaning this, things that cause sorrow or distress or trouble. Have you ever wished in your life when you, looking back, you wish someone would come up to you and have said, whoa, as in, whoa, so that you save you from some woe? Boy, I didn't even have that in my notes, but that would work. Right? Boy, don't we wish we'd had some help if someone goes, whoa, so that it would save us from some woe? Some trouble, someone says, slow up, don't make that decision, don't do that. It's not all the same. There is a difference about what you're going to do. It'll save you from some woe. But he says, woe to those who call evil good. And there's some woes from verse 8 to verse 21 here, and I'm just going to quickly read them. And you can let them sit and research them later. But verse 8 says this, woe to those who buy up houses and properties and kick everyone else off. I'm not kidding, that's what it talks about. That thing could sit a while on some of the issues we've had of people who buy up properties just to kick other people off and make a profit. That's in the Bible. We'll leave that. Verse 11, woe to those who rise early in the morning and they make follow intoxicating drink, who continues until night until wine inflames them. When you start early, start drinking early, day drinkers, and it moves into the night. Saying, whoa, you're going to have sorrow, you're going to have troubles. He's just saying, this is going to cause problems in your life. Yes, it does. The third one in verse 18, woe to those who draw iniquity with cords of vanity. Vanity, because of their pride, cause problems with people around them. And woe to those who are wise in their own eyes. You're the only one who thinks you are right and fine. Anybody here always thinks they're right? You think you know what you're doing? You won't let anyone tell you otherwise. I put it like this in terms of, to tie into what we're preaching on today. Woe to those who can't see the difference. C being the letter C, and I'll show you why. Woe to those who can't see the difference. Part 1's message here is just called simply C, the letter C. Woe to those who can't see the difference. See, the idea of being able to look at something and tell the difference between good and evil, right and wrong, bitter and sweet, light and darkness, it was gifted to us by Adam and Eve. Everyone say, thanks, Adam and Eve. Right? Because in the garden, they had the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life, well, everything except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And they could participate in everything, and they didn't really have a lot of what's the difference? I don't know what to do here. That they could stay with all this, and evil hadn't been introduced until Eve actually went to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and grabbed what everyone says is an apple, we don't know what it was, and looked at it and literally looked at the tree of life, tree of knowledge of good and evil, looked at the apples of life and the apple of good and evil, and looked back and forth and said, what's the difference? Right? She looked at it and said, I don't know what the difference is between these two things, and partook of it. And from that moment on, they found out and had to then decipher in decisions between what was good and evil, because before that it was just good. And in that moment, then we now had that gifted to us. Now we have to figure out what's right and wrong, what's good and evil. Genesis 3:22 in the Amplified, I'm just going to reference this, says, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing the difference between good and evil. In that moment, we had to then sit there and go, what's the difference? When it looks the same to us. And so since the apple, we've needed to know the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, being able to see the difference. And it's not always as easy as it may look. So we're going to jump into 3 things here. 3 ways to see the difference, and then I'm going to get out of here. Let me just help you out. For those of you that are like me, the first point is the lengthiest point. So if you're like me and you're a mathematical mind and you see that I've gone a long time in the first point, don't multiply that by 3 and start freaking out. The second one's shorter, and the third one's the shortest. All right, we'll be out here in good, timely fashion. So 3 ways to see the difference. Number 1 is context. Context. Definition of context: the circumstances that form the setting for an event, a statement or idea, and in terms of which it can be fully understood and assessed. Context is the circumstances that, help form an event, or you can understand something. Remember when I gave the examples of die? When I didn't have the full sentence, you didn't have the full context, you couldn't understand it properly. You couldn't see the difference between the two words. Have you ever played that game Spot the Difference or See the Difference? Has anyone ever done a Spot the Difference? If you're watching online, have you ever played Spot the Difference? Thanks, Liz, for saying whoa. Jen Link saying whoa. Marlene saying whoa. Carrie saying whoa. Jonathan saying whoa. There we go. But have you ever played Spot the Difference game? And you look at two things and you find the difference in the pictures? All right, so we have a picture here that we're going to show. And I apologize now for our projector. It's not as easy to see stuff because we need a new bulb, but we're getting on that. But anyways, here's Spot the 5 differences. So why don't you just take a few seconds and spot the differences there with the picture. Yeah. Anyone spot any differences? Anybody? Anybody online? If you spot a difference, give me a shout out. Tell me what you spotted. Well, why haven't you spotted any differences? See, without the context of the other side of this picture, it's really hard to tell what's the difference. It's really hard to tell because there's no other reference point. There's no other side to this picture. See, sometimes we face situations that, we hear something and we think we know the full picture. Just keep that up there. I don't care. You can keep it up for a while until I go to my next point. And we see this and we think we know the full picture. We have the whole story, but we haven't seen the other side. So something might be misrepresented. It's happening a lot in social media right now. You get one side or the other, and people are absolutely certain they're right. But how about when someone tells you their side of the story? And you think, oh yeah, and they're often in the form of telling on someone else. And you're like, yeah, that sounds legitimate, and that sounds great. And you go, yeah, that seems right. But then maybe if you're mature enough, you go to that person who they were talking about, and you ask them their side of the story, and then they give you the other side of the picture, and all of a sudden you go, oh. And you compare them, and you go, there is a difference. It's not all the same. Something's going on. You get context. See, but even in terms of how we handle things in our life and we see things, we don't often see them accurately or full, and we see them through our lens. I've said this lots. You don't see things as they are, you see things as you are. So I got something from TikTok. I learned something from TikTok. TikTok's a swear word in our house. So just let you know, my wife does not appreciate TikTok, but I still managed to navigate some good TikTok stuff. But this one person, I don't remember the whole thing, the whole context, but I read her enough to give the story. She was talking about this idea, and she said this: if you're looking at 3 white doors, it's easy to see 3 white doors. But if your lens is a little bit colored, things can look different. Let me give you an example. Back in the day, I was a rapper. Anybody? Yeah? Yo to go! Youth Outreach to go! How big is big? B-I-G, chill for a while, reminiscent 93. The power of God hitting people like lightning. People laughing over here, over there, they're crying. Anyways. Devil, this big. Anyways. I'm here all week, folks, signing autographs in the corner after. But I was rapping. I thought it was really cool, and I had a partner. My name is Melody Flat, because I was always flat, I guess, when I sang. And he was G-Tie. But anyways, we got these colored glasses. They were like the little circle ones. Elton John or John Lennon glasses, like that. And mine were blue, and his were green. And I put those on, and we thought we were cool. Rappers. White rappers, Yeah. Oxymoron, right? So anyways. But I put them on, and what I discovered is when you wear those with blue lenses, guess what? When you're looking at light colors, especially white, it looks blue. And when he was wearing his green glasses, guess what? When he was looking at white, it looked green. So if we're looking at 3 white doors, I'd look and say, yo, G-Tie, these doors are blue. No. Melody, these doors are green. No, they're blue, G-Tie. Melody, they're green. Actually, they're white. Actually, they're white. Because if somebody came along with red lenses, they say, no, these doors are red. And somebody with another color, because your lens makes you see something the way it is. And just because our perspective or our lens of something tells us something does not mean it's actually what's happening or is the reality. Our lens often colors us to our preconceived notions. This is a little deep. But if you get this, this is important. If not, you can come back and ask somebody or come to groups on Tuesday and ask this question. But our lens often colors us to our preconceived notion. So if we've been raised to see things blue, we see blue everywhere we go, even if it's in fact white or another color. And when we see other people talking blue talk, we get excited and we go, this is truth, this is reality, this is what it is. And we can't always see the difference because everything starts seeing the same, because it's our lens that already helps us to go towards our preconceived notions. And how we see something is most likely how we continue to see something. And because of this lens, we may not have the full picture or see the full color because we don't have the full context. And we can't see the difference. We do not realize that the doors are white and we're just seeing them in a blue way. Or a green way. Or a red way. Let me look at a scripture to show you this. I'll prove it to you. Genesis 37:12 to 24. I'm going to jump into actually verse 17, the second half. You can read from verse 12. It kind of gives you the context. I'll give you the Cole's Notes version. There's a guy named Joseph, son of Jacob. He's the youngest son of Jacob, and he's the only son, I think, to the wife, Jacob's wife Rachel. He's the youngest. He's the favorite. He has a coat of many colors that his dad gave him. As the youngest, if you're the youngest, you know sometimes you get favored, right, DeRory? Yeah, he says, yeah. I try not to favor him. But this guy was special. And not only that, Joseph thought he was a pretty important dude. And so he had dreams about how everybody else, he was going to be an influencer, you know. He's going to influence the world. He's going to be TikTok famous and do all these things, and everyone's going to like him. And all his brothers were actually going to bow down to him and worship him. And his brothers didn't like that. So one day the brothers were out watching sheep, and his dad, Jacob, said to him, hey, go check on your brothers. Sent him out to go find them and see if they're okay. That's where we're jumping into this story. Genesis 37:17, the second half of verse 17. So Joseph went after his brothers, and found him in Dothan. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Uh-oh, that's not nice. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. Look at your neighbor and say, a pit. If you're watching today, say a pit. Come on Facebook there. Make some comments. If you're on YouTube as well, say the pit. Say, come on, let us kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands. Reuben had a plan to go back and save Joseph. As we find out, something else ended up happening, but Reuben wasn't in on it, but obviously didn't have the courage to say anything in that moment. So they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. They took him and cast him into a pit. Everyone say pit. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it. I think they put that in to say, hey, guys, he didn't drown. He wasn't sitting there trying to tread water. But he hit the pit. And I'm sure that it was a decently dug pit. And when he hit the bottom of it, it wouldn't have felt good. And if we look at this in our lens, and we look at this story from this perspective, there's a couple things I know. Number one, the brothers' motives were not good. They said, let's kill him. We would call this evil. And then when Joseph hit the ground and went, ugh, I'm sure what was flashing through his mind is not, this is great. This is exactly where I wished I was today when I started out on my journey. This is something great. I'm glad I'm going through this circumstance. I'm glad I'm going through this. I'm glad my brothers tossed me in the pit. I'm sure that wasn't Joseph's thought process. In fact, he was probably being like, guys, hey, brothers, I'm sorry. I won't tell you my dreams again. Okay, guys, the joke's gone a little too far. You could let me out now. Reuben, Simeon, I don't actually know all their names. Judah. And so in that context of seeing that, if we read this story, there's not a lot of good of his brothers being there. In fact, he's been rejected by the people that are supposed to be his family. You don't look at this and go, man, this is great. They wanted to end his life. And so in that moment, with the lens that Joseph had, the lens that his brothers have, if we read this just not knowing the end of the story like some of you do, we read this and this would be considered bad, this would be considered wrong, this would be considered evil, this would be considered darkness, this would be considered completely bitter. And us as Christians, sometimes we see situations like that, and with our lens or not knowing the full picture, we get into it, and our tendency is to just push back and be like, get our spiritual, on, and we push back the darkness and against the pit, and we rebuke that pit, and we try to pray everything through, and we want to do stuff to get in, because that's what our lens tells us to do in this situation. It was quiet. And so we'd be praying if we were there for Joseph and saying, God, deliver him from this pit and then remove him from this pit and everything like that. And we'd be pushing back the dark forces, asking God to bring him out of the pit. Because usually our lens tells us that the only way to see a pit is that it's pitiful. Our lens tells us that the only thing a pit can be good for is something pitiful, something bad, something bitter, something evil. But that's because we didn't have the full picture yet. Why don't you throw up that second one, Josiah? Oh, yeah, you guys, we'll put that up after. We've had some comments on I changed the things too fast. Okay, you want to turn those lights down just for those in here. You online can see it probably really clearly. Now, let's say, and it's still hard, I'm sorry, but can you spot some differences now? Can you see a difference now? It's hard, but there's a little line on the right one there, depending how you look at it. There's an extra line underneath. There's an extra dot on the watermelon. The feet are different. Hey, that's some good eyes. The hand and the cheeks. There we go. There's the 5. See how fast that was? Why? Because you can step out and you have the full context. You have the full picture. You have the full story. See, and we have the benefit of jumping ahead 12, 13, 14 years and seeing Joseph at the end of this story. And what we don't realize is if you look at the pit as only being pitiful, then guess what? You don't realize the process that had to happen, because he went from a pit to Potiphar's house as a slave, and then he went from Potiphar's house to a prison, but then he went from prison to a palace where he was second in command. And from that palace, he was able to rescue his family from famine. And if we can't tell the difference, sometimes we get confused and we go, this pit is awful, this pit is bad. But we forget that sometimes it might not just be that the pit seemed pitiful, but guess what? The pit was a pivot to position for the palace. I think Joseph had to work some things out in his life. That's just my personal opinion. And he learned some things along the way. But the pit ended up being a pivotal point to position Joseph for the palace. And if Joseph didn't go through the pit, he wouldn't have gone to Potiphar's house. If he didn't go to Potiphar's house, he wouldn't have gone to prison, which isn't always good. But if he wouldn't have gone to prison, he wouldn't have got to the palace, because that's where he interpreted a dream that 2 years later the Pharaoh heard about and brought him to the palace to be second in command. And if Joseph wouldn't have got to the palace, then guess what? When the famine came, his family would have died out and he wouldn't have had anybody left. But he didn't realize when he was sitting in the pit, calling that thing pitiful, not seeing the full picture, not seeing the full context, that there was a purpose in that pit. There was a purpose in that pain. There was a purpose in that struggle, that if you're willing to walk through it and sometimes say, God, I don't see it all. I can't see the full picture, but God, help me to see like you see. Help me to see what you're leading me to. Help me to see the purpose in this. Then guess what? You may be on your first step to the way to the palace. The pit is not pitiful. Context helps us to see the difference between the pit that is pitiful and the pit that is pivotal. Some pits are pitiful. Some pits we create and we fall in. But not every pit is. And so we need to be able to see the difference between the pit that is just pitiful and the pit that is pivotal to help us. And because God also can turn everything to good. Some pits that we create that are pitiful, God can still make them pivotal. Oh, I'm going to say that again. That's not in my notes. Someone needs to get excited. Somebody online needs to hear this today. See, because of our own silliness and humanity, we make mistakes where we create pits that end up being pitiful, but God can still take them and make them pivotal and make them into something with purpose. And so some of us may have been resisting, watch. Somebody watching online may have been resisting some things, saying they're pitiful. And God's just saying, hey, guess what? This is pivotal to getting you to the palace. But we're seeing them as blue, and God's saying, this is actually white. All right, number 2, I got to move on. I told you I'd take a long time with this first one. I'm only 1 minute and 26 seconds behind, so. So number 1, seeing the difference, context. Number 2, consistence. You may say, Derek, you preached a series on this a few weeks ago. Yes, I did. It was called Unbinge, the Beauty of the Small, Consistent Daily. But you know why I'm going back to it? Because this is about the time, I don't know about you, but 5-6 weeks ago, I made some small changes, some 10-minute changes in my life of things I adjusted to make them routines, to become habits in my life. And this is about the time where you start going, oh, I stopped doing that a little bit. Anybody? Oh, I noticed that's not happening. Oh, yeah, and so before we know it, it was a binge effect that we actually didn't use to change our lives, and it was just for a season. Now, it may have been longer than a day, but it was a few weeks, but that's why I'm coming back to it, saying consistent again, and knowing what's the difference, you need to be consistent. Let me show you this. How many has watched the show on History Channel called Pawn Stars, P-A-W-N Stars? It's a pawn shop in Vegas. It's one of the most famous ones. And they get people coming in exchanging things all the time and trying to sell them old antiques, signed by everybody famous, old trading cards, old toys, old money. And if it's signed by the person, old guitars signed by famous people. And they put a value on it. And so some guy brought in a letter written by George Washington. And Rick, the owner of it now, said, if this thing's real, it's worth $100,000. And Rick, who's worked there for many years, you hear him talk, he knows everything about everything. But when it's high value and someone's bringing something in, what does he do in order to make sure that this thing is authenticated or that make sure he's not getting taken? He brings in an expert. He brings in an expert. And so for this, he brought in someone who analyzed the paper, and they said, hey, the paper is of the right time period, and they got a little excited. And then he started analyzing the letter, and he was reading it, and he's comparing it, and he goes, no, this letter isn't written by George Washington. Then they went to the signature. Said, no, it's not written by George Washington either. So they said it was probably a secretary of George Washington, but it's in the time period, so it's still worth $4,000. Not $100,000, but still worth $4,000. But what Rick had to do, even though he was well-versed in some of this stuff, he brought someone whose life was consistent with figuring that stuff out. He didn't just bring someone off the street. He brought someone in who that was their job, who had some time with it, who was an expert in it. And watch this. When he brought it in to compare, to find out if it was real, guess what? The guy did not bring in 10 forged signatures of George Washington to compare the signature to find out if it's real. He brought in 2 or 3 authentic George Washington signatures and then compared them. This is what they do if they're teaching people to notice counterfeit money. I actually fact-checked this because I heard this a long time ago. When they're trying to teach federal agents how to find fake money, you would think sometimes the tendency would be to show them a whole bunch of fake money. Here's all the fakes out there, and if you can learn everything about the fake money, then you're not going to be fooled. You'll know the real money. But you know what? They don't show them any of the fake money. You know what they do? They show them the real money. Someone say, show me the money. No, I'm just kidding. They show them the real money. And if they get familiar and consistent enough with the real money, then guess what? The fake money doesn't fool them. So it was John MacArthur in a book wrote this the first time, and Tim Shelley's fact-checked it because he wasn't sure if it was real. He actually went to an agency, a federal agency, and they walked him through the steps of it. And this is what he said they told him to do. Touch, tilt, look at, look through. Touch, tilt, look at, look through the money. And so he did that with a real bill. And he touched, and he tilted, and he looked at, and he looked through, and he learned everything about what made real money. And then they gave him the test. Put a bunch of fake ones, mixed them in. And he said, the first few were really easy, and then some were hard, but he didn't get one wrong. He said it was actually easier than he thought because he immersed himself, he got consistent with, he got familiar with the legit. See, sometimes we're struggling with the counterfeit, and we're spending time with the counterfeit. We're touching the counterfeit. We're looking at the counterfeit. We're feeling it. We're spending time with it, and then we wonder why we have trouble with the legit. See, we have trouble with some decisions. Why aren't we hearing God? Well, what about how much time have you been spending in the counterfeit? Psalm 1:1-3 says this in the New King James. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He says, blessed is the man who doesn't do this. See, if you're doing this, if you walk in the counsel of the ungodly, if you stand in the path of sinners or sit in the seat of the scornful, I'm just going to leave that for the sake of time, but there's a lot I could say there. The thing I do want to say, notice the progression. I've said this a few years back, but it stuck with me. The first thing he does is he's walking by the counterfeit and kind of goes, oh, yeah, okay, and then keeps going. Next time walking by and says he stands. First time he walks to the counsel of godly, nor stands in the path of sinners, he stands and stops. Kind of goes, that looks like a good decision. Right? Like the first time you walk by the decision, go, no, I'm not doing that. That's not legit. The second time you kind of walk, and now you're standing and you're going to spend some time, oh, okay. And then the third time it says, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. Now he's just sitting down, or she. Notice the progression. And then all of a sudden you're surrounded with counterfeit, and then you go, why don't I know the legit? Why can't I make good decisions? Why do I always end up here? Because you're surrounding yourself with counterfeit, and you don't know the legit. So here's the less consistent you are with the legit, the more tricked you are by the counterfeit. The less consistent you are with legitimate things, right things, the more you get tricked by counterfeit. The guy looked at the real money, and he wasn't tricked by counterfeit because he spent time getting consistent, learning about he was looking at it, touching it, tilting it, all those things. And so we're touching, tilting, looking through counterfeit things, looking through things that aren't helping us, not benefiting our lives, and we wonder why sometimes we make some bad decisions. Why we didn't see that decision was going to be a wrong one. We think this open door that's been provided us, this is the door I got to walk in, and then we go through it and go, what happened? Why isn't this working out the way we thought it should do? Why isn't this relationship working out? If only I knew it was going to fail. Why did I waste my time trying to do this? Why couldn't I see the difference? It's because you have to spend time getting to know the legit. The OG, who's heard of that? Anyone heard OG? It means original gangster. But I think before that, it means original God. The OG, the original G-O-D. Yeah, you know me. No, I'm getting into my rap time. I got to settle down here. I'm getting too excited. The original God, that if you spend time getting to know the OG, the original God, and spend time in His presence, getting in His Word, praying, getting around the people of God, coming to church, immersing yourself in that, then when you get to a tough decision, one that maybe the Scriptures doesn't have an answer for, you can look and go, man, I know I've been spending time with the legit. I know I'm making the right decision. You're not making it on circumstances or confusion or counterfeit things because you say, yeah, God, help me with this thing. And as you do that, you're going to be able to see the difference between legit and counterfeit. Study, look into it, spend time with it. Why do we want to do this? This is just a benefit. Back to Psalm 1:1-3, he says, his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. That's consistency, day and night, day and night, day and night. This person's doing it consistently. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he shall do shall prosper. Come on, look at your neighbor and say prosper. If you're in the upper room today, say prosper. If you're still watching online with me, say prosper. Come on, type in prosper. There's 26 of you watching. Whatever you do will prosper. The more consistent you are with the legit, the more consistent you'll prosper in it. If you're new, I rhyme everything. I don't know why. It's just it's from my rap days, that's why. I just haven't been able to shake it. My ode to my rap days. The more consistent you are with the legit, the more consistent you will prosper in it. You're going to make better decisions. And that's what this verse says. You're going to prosper in it. Someone say, see the difference. Look at your neighbor and say, can you see the difference? Jen Link, Kim Mayer, prosper, prosper. City Center Church is saying prosper. Fabian, prosper. Jenny Ward. Kiana Bird, prosper. Adrian Thomas, prosper. Well done. Thank you, everybody. Number 3. See, I said we get faster and faster. Last point, and then I'm out of here. I'll let you guys go. Special grace for those who are doing so well with their kids in here today. I know it's not easy. Number 3. Number 1, we had context. Number 2, we had, what was it? And number 3, we've got counsel. The 3 ways to see the difference. We talk about the OG getting to spend time with the original God. But guess what? Sometimes that's hard. If I can tell someone, you need to spend time with God and God will talk to you and tell you which decision to make. Some of you just go, whoa, God talks? That's crazy. I don't know what God sounds like. We had a group discussion last Tuesday on what does God sound like? How do you even know? I get that that's really difficult. And even for me at times, I said, sometimes you're sitting there and you're praying about it and you don't know what to do. And you're going 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Should I take this job? Is God calling me here? Am I supposed to stay here? Help. I can't see that. It all looks the same to me. I can't see the difference. Well, guess what? God's put some people in your life that are experts in things. I referenced the story of Pawn Stars when he brings in an expert. Guess what? Rick brings in outside counsel to help him whether or not these things are legitimate or not, to help him with the decision, to make sure he's making the right decisions. And so there's people in your life that God's put experts that can help you. See, if you don't like where your finances are at, guess what? Don't go to your friend that has no savings, no job, no financial security, no way of knowing what to do. Go to the one who has a budget, who has some savings, who has some investments, has some money set aside in retirement. Go to them. You don't like where your relationship's at, don't go to the 3 people that just had a divorce. I'm serious. Don't go to the people that are single that have, I don't know, they don't have any. Go to an expert who actually can come in, and because they've been consistent, because they've spent time with the legit. If you can't hear it, then go to somebody who's spent time with the legit and can come in and say, hey, I can pray with you. I can help you. I've been down this road. I'm an expert. I've seen some George Washington signatures. I've seen that door's white. I've seen that this is sweet and this is bitter. This is light. This is darkness. This is evil. This is good. Let me help you out. Oh, come on. This is good preaching. It's good preaching, Becca. Chrissy, prosper. Liz, see the difference. There we go. So if you don't like where your relationship is at, don't go to 3 people that just had a divorce. Go to some couples that have had a long, healthy relationship, who maybe have been through some stuff and got to the other side. Go to a counselor. Find those whose marriage is legit. You don't like being single. Don't go to all your single friends and talk about how miserable you are. Why don't you find someone who... Why don't you find a few people who have just gotten married and what they did to get there? What did you do? How did you do this? Help me out. Maybe you love being single. Anybody love being single? Bob. No word of a lie. He put his hand up. We've got some counselors helpful. No. I don't know if it's because he was just into it or he actually heard what I said. Bob loves being single. But if you love being single, don't go to all the singles who are lonely and pining for a significant other. Find some singles that are thriving in their singleness and loving the season they're in, right? You want to know if you should do something or not. You want to know if you're doing good. What you're going to do is good or evil. You go to someone who has wisdom on the matter. This is similar to some stuff I've said, but I think it's important, again, because we hear something and then we kind of get all excited about it and then we fall away. And God's really getting us to come back to some of this stuff so that we can tell the difference between some things. Get some counsel. Ezekiel 44:23. It says this, they, talking about the Levites, if you look at the rest of the verses before, shall teach my people the difference. Teach my people the difference between the holy and unholy and cause them to discern between the clean and the unclean and the clean. Levites were sort of leaders. They were designated to help the people do stuff in the temple, do the sacrifices. So they were kind of there to teach the people the difference, to offer counsel for the difference. There's people in your life that can help you see the difference. That as you look at something, because of your lens of how you were brought up, they can come up and say, listen, let me help you pull those lenses off so I can help you see that it's a white door. That I can help you see that you're about to step in some crap that you don't need to step in. That you may be seeing it differently. Let me add some perspective. Let me add some counsel. I've had some experience with this. And watch this. Sometimes the lens is so dark that it's almost like you're blind and you just can't see it right in front of you. And this is the time you need help the most. You need counsel the most. You need to reach out the most because they're called blind spots for a reason. Because when you look, you can't even see it coming. So you need someone to pull those off and say, maybe if I can just help you to pull that lens off, you'll be able to see this accurately. People in your life to do that because this is why. This is why, listen, the price of admitting that we can't see the difference is far less than the price of ignoring that we can't see the difference. Think about that. The price of admitting that we can't see the difference, it's to our pride. Saying we need help or saying, oh, I can do this, I got this. The price of admitting to our flesh, to our insecurities, to maybe, what if they say something I don't agree with? The price of that is far less than the price of just ignoring that we can't see a difference. This is the way it is. I'm just going to go ahead. I may be seeing a blue door even though it's white. I don't care. This may be a blind spot. I'm just going to forge ahead because I think I'm right. The price is way greater ignoring than at least admitting. It's okay to need some help to see the difference. It's not okay to pretend you don't. Pretend I don't. And so I'm coming to a close here. I actually was planning to end here until a few days before. And I wanted to flip the script a bit. So we have this idea of what's the difference, what to do when it looks the same to you. There's three things: context. What's the second? And what's the third? Context, consistency, and counsel to help you know what's the difference, because I think we're going to have some challenging decisions in front of us. And we have for a year. But if we come in just with our guns a-blazing in our own lens and say this is the way it is, because that's the way it was done 20 years ago, we're going to miss the white door. We're going to miss the sweet, and we're going to just end up in the bitter. And I think sometimes the thing is, the tendency, because of our lens we're coming from, we're even calling some things evil that may be good, and we're calling some things good that may be evil. We're calling some things light that may be darkness, and darkness may be light, bitter, sweet, right? So we got to be willing to go, God, what do you have for us? We want to be able to see the difference. But I'm going to flip this a little bit as we close here. Music team, come on up. If you guys promise you won't get distracted by them walking up. I'm going to flip it a bit here, because this is what God challenged me with, and it's kind of what we've been talking about. I'll get a drink while they meander. See, up till now, I've been saying to you, we've been looking at this from the angle of helping others to be able, or helping us to be able to see the difference. I'm going to flip it here, and then we're going to end. And I want to ask this question. You ready? Can others see the difference in us? This is centered more towards Christians, churchgoers. If you're new watching online, or if you're new here in the upper room, you kind of get maybe a break. But this can challenge you as well. But I'm pushing some of those who call ourselves believers, who've been plugging into maybe our church for a bit here. Here's the question. Can others see the difference in us? Right, Charlene? Can others see the difference in us? Huh? Yeah? Pierre, right? That's a good question, right? Just try to keep people engaged for the last few minutes. Can others see the difference in us? If they were to hold a picture up of the world and us, would they be able to see or spot the difference? Come on, throw that last one up there, Josiah. You're going to have to put the lights down a bit more again, Brian, sorry. But that last picture, is this the difference that people have to try to see in our lives? Where you have to look like this and study it and kind of go, oh, I think Can they see a difference, or is it so complex and convoluted and so many things that are similar, they look and go, what's the difference? What's the difference? Everyone's studying it intently to try to find a difference. I found some. What if I made it and there was no differences? There is, yeah. But listen. Can people see the difference, or do they have to look for so hard and so long to finally see something? See, if they looked at our finances, I'm talking to church people, I'm talking to Christians here today if you're watching. If they looked at your finances and they put them up next to their finances, someone who's not saved, someone who doesn't believe in Jesus, would there be any difference, or would someone have to look and go, oh yeah, I see once 10 years ago, I think they gave some money to a church? Or would they see generosity and offerings and tithings and giving to things be a part of your life? Would they see a difference? What about your schedule? If they looked at your schedule book and they opened it up between theirs, they could look and see, okay, well, what's the difference? Well, yeah, I guess maybe Sunday church. But even now, guess what? It's really hard to see the difference in your life if you're just watching from home all the time. I am a full believer in watching from home rather than not watching at all. So that's why I also want you to comment. Let people know that you're here and engaged. Let them see the difference in your life. Someone looks and goes, oh, so-and-so's watching online. They're here. But if they looked at your schedule, would there be any difference? If they looked at your priorities, what do you prioritize? Pastor Jim talked about, what do you put first? If they looked at your schedule and your priorities, would there be any difference, or would they be looking going, oh, I don't know, that's very similar to what I look like? How about your language? This isn't even in my notes. I'm just going to step now and get a little firmer. What about your language? What about what you watch? What about, I wrote this, I got to get it, how we treat others. Do they see a difference in how you love, how your kindness shows, how you're forgiving, how you're patient? Is there a difference? Or do they look and say, what's the difference? It all seems the same to me. When they see how we live our lives, do they look and the picture's up there and they can immediately, is it that first set of pictures where you look and go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's the difference? Or is it kind of convoluted? Kind of like, When they see how we live our lives, do they see joy? Do they see peace? Do they see how you deal with a struggle or a pit different than how they might deal with a pit or a struggle? When they watch you and go, this is a pit, your brother's tossed you in the pit, isn't that pitiful? And you say, no, but God is bigger. We sang the song, anything is possible with God. God can turn evil into good. God can make it good. I see this pit as pivotal of stepping into purpose. Do they see how you live your life? Is it different than them? Is it something that they want and they go, I want this. This is different. I can clearly see a difference. Church, it's time for us not only to be able to see the difference, it's time to us to be the difference. And if you're doing your alphabets, when you get into kindergarten, A, B, C, D, right? B always comes before C. And it's only when we choose to be the difference that other people will start to see the difference. And to kind of bring it back, you only be the difference when you see the difference and make good decisions. We make different decisions than others would make. But it's only when we choose to be the difference, others will see the difference. So we're closing it here. So there's kind of two things. And I usually like to keep it with one, but I just felt I had to land on this. That as we continue talking about the things God's doing in our life, He's going to start to change some things. Or if we're open, we get with the legit, we're going to start to know, okay, we need to alter this, we need to adjust this. I need to start learning how to be the difference. And God can help us do that. But He can also help us see the difference. And one way we do it, remember context through our lens. Say, today if you're sitting here, we're going to come and we're going to worship. And maybe you need to say, God, is my lens blue? Or maybe you're not familiar with God quite yet to be comfortable to ask God. Maybe just ask yourself, what is the lens I've been seeing some stuff? What have I been putting my blue tint on this? Have I been putting my blue tint on my relationship in my life? Have I been putting a blue tint on my job and my boss? Have I been putting this, or is there something that I can step back and go, maybe it's different? And if you're not sure, then maybe you need to get some consistent and say, hey, I'm going to start digging into some word. I'm going to start coming to church more often. I'm going to start coming to groups and figure this stuff out. And then even if those two things don't work, say, maybe I'm going to get some counsel. And say, hey, am I seeing this right? Help me to see this right. So that's in terms of seeing the difference. I believe this is why I was saying this. There's going to be some big decisions. Some people watching, some people in this room, some people in the upper room. You're either going through it right now or you're about to go through some big decisions, and you need to be able to tell what's the difference. I felt that in my heart. So whatever, if you're facing a decision, I want to make sure you're stepping back and saying, okay, am I doing the 3 C's? Am I seeing the right context? Have I been consistent with the right things to see this? And am I getting counsel? And make sure you do that in this upcoming season, because I think some of you are going to be faced with some. And then the last thing, I want us to ask ourselves, God, what can we do to be the difference? That when people look at me, they see something different. They see you inside of me. They see you changing me and living life differently. God, continue to shape me, continue to mold me, continue to move me into who you want me to be so others can see you inside of me. I'm sensing this. Some of you, and I don't want this to come across as negative, because some of you have maybe been struggling with stuff and feeling like you haven't been the difference. But I kind of sensing God almost encouraging people, if you feel like you're struggling with this, saying, man, I don't know if I have much difference. God's saying, I can see the difference. And know this, if you're completely been struggling with that, watching online or in here in the upper room, and you go, I didn't even know there was a difference to be had. Because we only get the power to be different when we get Jesus in our lives. He gives us the power to overcome, to be different, to step into some different things that we can't do on our own strength. So if you're watching today, if you're in here and you say, I don't know this Jesus person, I've never asked him to become a part of my life in order to be the difference, in order to have the power to be the difference, then I want you to call the number. I think we're still doing it, 1-844, no, 1-844-844-7900, is that it? Ooh, that's good. And I think Pat's in the upper room across and she's got the phone. We still have that going for right now.